Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a virtual but hearty welcome to those joining us online today. This is a really exciting day for NAMCOR. The theme of this seminar is unlocking youth participation in Namibia's oil and gas industry. And it's good to see that we don't just have youth today, we also have our seniors represented here today. And it sure does give concrete expression to the saying that the idea behind longevity is to die young as late as possible. So if we can agree on anything today, it's really to say that being youthful is not just a function of age, but more so a function of the state of mind, body, and soul. So please don't feel discriminated today. So after 48 years of exploration, Namibia could find itself the third largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa within a decade. And the purpose why we're here today is really to reimagine a new Namibia and identify the opportunities presented by the oil and gas sector essentially. And discover the endless possibilities that lie ahead essentially today. I know that there are those that say that we are still preoccupied with appraisals and assessing the commercial viability of the oil finds, and that we should take a tentative approach and manage expectations. And they're right. We need to manage expectations, but that should not take away from the fact that we need to focus on preparing ourselves for opportunity when it comes. And we all know that the magic, or the real magic, happens when preparation meets opportunity. And often preparation seems like a long, excruciating time, like these 48 years of exploration and appraisal activities, but it takes time to prepare, hence the catchphrase, race to first oil. Opportunity passes by the person that is unprepared, and our commitment is really to equip you with the fundamentals of the oil and gas industry and the conceptual understanding to identify opportunity. That's why we're essentially here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to speak to you and with you today, and my privilege to deliver a few opening remarks at this seminar event exclusively powered by NAMCOR. NAMCOR is the National Oil and Gas Corporation of Namibia, and as the custodian of the Namibian state's interest and participation in all things oil and gas, our primary purpose of existence is really to harness and unlock the fullness of Namibia's hydrocarbon potential across the entire value chain for all stakeholders, and of course the youth being one such important stakeholder. I recall at a gala event in April 2023, in the midst of extensive media coverage on NAMCOR, I had made a metaphorical expression of the challenges we were facing as an entity, and I had likened what we were going through as labor pains, and by implication this made the Ministry of Mines and Energy the midwife to help us deliver the baby. I know that the Honorable Minister wasn't entirely pleased with that metaphorical expression, but in any event, I'm not sure if at this point we have delivered the baby, or maybe we're still pushing. But I'm sure the Minister will tell us when he delivers his address. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to share the opportunities presented by Namibia's nascent oil and gas sector. And we've got an exciting lineup of technocrats from within NAMCOR. So I would like us to all put on our mental track shoes and run with our technocrats and speakers here today. We have an exciting lineup of speakers. We have Ms. Nakashole, who will be unpacking the upstream cycle and will be dealing in mostly the fundamentals, because the argument that we present is in order for you to be able to identify the business opportunities, you need to understand the concept of oil and the entire oil and gas value chain. Ms. Savenda Nakashole is our chief geoscientist. And we then have Mr. Ntundeni Ndafialako, who will be looking at the socio-economic benefits presented by the discoveries. We will be looking into the direct and indirect and induced benefits essentially associated with the discoveries essentially. And then we have Mr. Francisco Kalenga, who will be unpacking the nexus between fossil fuels and renewables, and particularly how not only NAMCOR but how Namibia intends on honoring the dual priorities of harnessing the hydrocarbon potential of Namibia and delivering socio-economic value whilst preserving the environment essentially. Basically, you're telling us why fossil fuels and sustainable energies can essentially live in harmony. So you'll also touch on the energy mix, and you'll also explain why baseload continues to be a problem. And then we'll go into the midstream and downstream sector, where Mr. Petrus Ndeunyema tomorrow will be unpacking the two sectors essentially. And then also we'll have Mr. Lucas Kandoa, who will dive into the upstream sector and give us a great depth and understanding. And then Mr. Petrus Ndeunyema, just to be a bit more practical, will be sharing with us the opportunities presented by the discoveries in the, establishing a flourishing steel industry by leveraging Namibia's iron ore deposits essentially. And then of course we've got Ms. Ramona Itembu tomorrow, who will be sharing the various opportunities to build human resource capacity, as well as some insight into the draft local content policy, which is under the auspices of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, as well as the opportunities presented by the Petro Fund, which is really a fund to fund Namibians in terms of capacity building. So the theme for each presenter is premised on a central question: what's in it for me? One way to learn is from our own experiences, and another way to learn is from other people's experiences. And so if somebody tells you these eggs are bad, you're not going to make an omelette and try it. So that's essentially what we've been doing over the past 1.5 years as NAMCOR. We've been conducting an inordinate number of benchmarking exercises. So we visited various jurisdictions, really from the departure point that we are a nascent industry. So we really need to understand and learn from those that have been there and done there, and essentially not repeat the same mistakes. We've come from a visit from Norway, and one of my greatest learnings was that they have 10 commandments, and all those commandments are premised on resource maximization and revenue maximization. And that has served them right, because they now have the world's biggest sovereign wealth fund of 1.5 trillion US dollars essentially. We visited Qatar, and they've got a robust understudy program. So everybody within Qatar Energy and management level is supported by an expat with wealth of experience. And that just speaks to their endeavors to ensure that there's real local content through capacity building essentially. And of course, we've learned that they've also invested in non-oil industry related sectors. For instance, they've invested heavily in Qatar Airways, and these are obviously a result of the proceeds of oil, and that's an attempt really to diversify the economy. Dubai is another example where proceeds of oil were used to establish a lucrative oil and gas industry and a flourishing tourism sector essentially. We visited Equatorial Guinea back here in Africa, and it was interesting. The oil industry service providers organized themselves and created some sort of association to develop the sort of competencies to add value to the sector. And when we visited them, they were actually organizing themselves to look at various jurisdictions, and Namibia is one such jurisdiction in terms of how they can tap into the sector. So typically welders, boiler makers, engineers who are experienced and seasoned in oil and gas to tap into new industries such as ours. So they actually have their jurisdictions to learn from. Angola, a bit of a late boomer, but they have since reorganized themselves. They've set up internal refineries. They started taking ownership of the oil and gas value chain, and they are actively involved in the construction of significant pieces of equipment that are fundamental in the construction of FPSO platforms. So these are floating production storage, offloading platforms for mining oil offshore essentially. A few years ago, I had an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to listen to the current president of Ghana, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, when he delivered a keynote address to a group of students in London in 2018 at an Oxford Africa Union conference. He narrated how Africa was rich in natural resources, and yet you would not know that we have these natural endowments. he narrated that we feel poor, we look poor, and we have huge infrastructural deficits. And from a Ghanaian point of view, he felt that this was because despite 60 years of independence, the country was stuck with the economy of a colony, that is the production and export of raw materials, which puts us in the mercy of wildly fluctuating commodity prices over which we have no control, and the import of manufactured commodities from industries of colonial powers, which creates wealth and jobs there but not at home. The problems, he admitted, have been exacerbated by mismanagement and corruption and by a dependence on foreign trade, which he attributed to a debilitating factor in our efforts to develop our countries, and it saps our self-confidence and undermines the dignity and respect that will propel us to prosperity. And he was also quick to point out that this was not because we were poor and proud, but because he wanted Ghana and the rest of Africa to set itself on a deliberate qualitative change in all aspects of our lives, especially in the structure of our economy, the nature of infrastructure, and the education of our young people, and the acquisition of skills. Ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly why we're here today. And this particular seminar really aims to address the skills myth. More often than not, we hear that Namibians or Namibian companies do not have the required skills or expertise to do this and that, or to support a particular industry. This is the same rhetoric that has created the condition where our economy is characterized by the export of raw materials, as we've seen predominantly with the mining industry. So the argument that we present is, if we had the same mindset that we do today, when we established our independence, we focused on local content policy, we empower people, would we still be having the sort of economic structure that we see today, where we probably don't get as much value from our resources because of limited beneficiation? So this is really an opportunity for us at the nascent stage of this oil and gas industry to really align ourselves and prepare ourselves for opportunity when it arrives. Lastly, as Namibia's national oil company, we are committed to developing a 15-year strategic master plan that will identify NAMCOR's role across the entire oil and gas value chain as a key enabler of unlocking Namibia's hydrocarbon potential. Now, in this particular 15-year master plan, of course, core strategy is organic. We will be modeling various business cases, whether it's the opportunity to construct a pipeline, a business case for constructing or not to construct a refinery, a business case for establishing a logistics base, so that when the opportunity presents itself, we're able to seize the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would agree that these were indeed a few words, I'd like to thank you all for being here today and wish you an enlightening evening. I thank you.